Thank you for staying with us. We're staying on President Donald Trump's decision to give Russia a 12-day deadline to end the Russia-Ukraine war. I'm joined by Doug Brooks, the President Emeritus, International Stability Operation Association. He joins me live from Dubai to talk about this recent development. Good to have you join us. Let's begin with what you deduce from President Trump's decision on this 10 to 12-day deadline to the Kremlin.
Well, I think he's under a lot of pressure because of the basically Putin and Russia have not responded to his demands that they have a ceasefire, that they stop attacking civilian targets, and so on. And basically, Russia's ignored Trump up until this point. Trump, as usual, sort of kicked it down the road and say, "Well, we'll deal with this in 40 or 50 days or whatever." But the Russians have been actually scaling up their attacks on civilian targets, and more Ukrainian civilians are being killed. And Trump is also trying to find some distractions from his own Epstein crisis. So he's escalated things a bit, not by much. I mean, already, 15 days have gone by. So now he's saying, okay, we're going to give Putin, a much shorter time frame to make some decisions. Thus far, the Russians have largely made fun of Trump's entreaties. We'll see if they start to pay attention. And one thing that's really interesting is Trump is saying, okay, we're going to look at secondary sanctions, which would have a very, very real and painful impact on the Russians. Basically, it would say to countries that use Russian oil or buy goods from Russia that they will also receive U.S. sanctions, and that
Right.
will be very painful.
And before we talk about the secondary sanctions that President Trump has threatened to impose and its impact on these countries, we've seen Trump apparently bringing this deadline forward, perhaps due to a lack of action from the Russian side. Some will agree with you that it's Trump's way of taking attention from some of his own policies. But do you think this is a warning to be taken seriously? And what does this mean for Ukrainians?
Well, the Ukrainians have welcomed it, and we have seen, I think, early in Trump's administration, he took a harder line against Ukraine and stopped sending weapons and allowing U.S. weapons to be sold to Ukraine. That's changed, and in fact, now the Europeans are able to buy some of these weapons, especially anti-aircraft missiles, Patriot system missiles for Ukraine, which is essential to defend themselves against this massive missile attack that Russia's been doing night after night. So there has been a change, and the Ukrainians are seeing this as very positive and moving in the right direction. And but the reasons why Trump is doing it, as you pointed out correctly, is he's running into some other issues with his other policies, and so this seems to be one that he can start to do something about. We've also seen Gaza. I think you covered that already. That he's starting to take, I think, a more of an interest in solving some of the problems related to that. So you're right. I think there are other things other than Russia that are actually making him sort of think that maybe this is something he can do something about and get some wins on if he can get the Russians to behave in a better way, I guess you would say.
Let's talk about the secondary sanctions and some of the countries that it would affect, like India and China. Is it likely for these other countries to influence Russia to change its position?
That's a really good question. And I think Trump does not quite have a grasp on what the costs of secondary sanction would be, not just to China and India, but to the United States. Essentially, this would be a very serious impact on international trade. It would definitely raise prices. I think for the United States, we're already seeing a start of growth in inflation because of the current policies Trump has in terms of the tariffs and things like that. This would probably accelerate that. So this would have definitely a negative impact on the U.S. It would very much have a negative impact on China and India, and would probably create some more problems beyond that. So it would, obviously Russia's very fearful. We saw a big drop in the Russian stock market because of this possibility. So they're very afraid of it. Russia's afraid of it. China's afraid of it. And I think Trump, they figure out that this is going to have an impact on the U.S. as well. But who knows? This may be what is needed to finally sort of spur the beginning of the end of this long conflict.
And this 10 to 12-day ultimatum, with what consequence really? The big question is, what will President Trump do exactly when this deadline runs out? But what kind of impact will it have on the Russian economy, perhaps on its war effort, and how it's likely to affect Ukraine itself?
Well, a couple of points. I mean, Trump is his deadlines are notoriously fuzzy, so he tends to kick things down the line a couple of weeks, and that's kind of vague enough that nobody keeps asking him, what about now? What about now? So 10 to 12 days, he's kind of roughly kicking it down the line, so he may not actually act on it for intensified 10 to 12 days. It's not a hard deadline, despite what the White House will claim. So there's that. But the actual impact of these sanctions on Russia would be very powerful. And I think if they are actually implemented, I mean, they would have a big impact on the world economy for sure. I mean, it's quite interesting that Russia continues. We're this far into the war. Russia's still selling oil and gas to Europe. And interestingly enough, I think last I heard they're still selling oil to the United States. Fuel oil for New England actually apparently comes still from Russia, which is kind of astonishing to me, but that's what we've been hearing. So, yes, I mean, if all this gets ramped up and the sanctions kick in, Russia's going to have some issues, but so is the whole world. It's very interesting. Russia would obviously suffer the most. So that's I think if we're trying to end this conflict where Russia's invaded Ukraine, yeah, that's a good thing to do. And maybe this should have been done from the beginning. We'll have to see.
And we've seen Ukraine's Zelensky also commending President Trump's effort at being targeted at saving lives that is being lost in this war. On this deadline issue, do you think this is enough to bring the war in Ukraine to an end and not just a ceasefire?
That's a really, really good question, and I don't think anyone can really answer that except for Vladimir Putin, who's basically been pushing this war. I think when you look at the Russian society and you look at the Russian leadership, I think really the only thing that's keeping this war going is Putin, who has a really strong grasp on society. And as we know, when prominent people disagree with Putin, they tend to fall out windows. Or recently, we saw somebody, a major industrialist, commit suicide, which has happened quite a bit, or allegedly commit suicide, I should say, which has happened quite a bit in Russia. So nobody wants to stand up to Putin, and Putin's the one person I think that really is keeping this war going. And the speculation is that if Putin were to step down or disappear or fall out a window himself, essentially there would be a pretty significant policy change within Russia. And it's not even clear who would take over. Ukraine is a democracy. If something were to happen to Zelensky or something, they have a method for replacing him, and their policies would generally stay the same. Russia doesn't have anything like that. And when you talk to Russians, there's no real successor to Putin. So he's the one thing holding this thing together, one thing keeping it going. And maybe he's gone too far to be able to back down. We'll have to see.
And we'll just wait out to see what happens in the next 10 to 12 days. In terms of a response of the Russian president to this deadline. But that's a fine place to leave the conversation for now. Doug Brooks, President Emeritus, International Stability Operations Association. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much.